Good morning. I'm going to call this meeting of the Inspector General Committee to order as of 9:02 a.m. on May 12, 2016. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
State Attorney Ehrenberg, Public Defender Howitt, Vice Chair Headley, Chair Kreidel,
Present.
Commissioner Lafredo,
Present.
Commissioner Pearman,
Present.
Commissioner Schulman.
Present.
Thank you. I believe we have a quorum. I know that at least one other member is on her way. At this point, as I indicated, this is a meeting of the Inspector General Committee. This is a semi-annual meeting, and we will review the activities of the Inspector General's office for the past 6 months. There have been distributed minutes from the meeting on November 12, 2015. The committee has had an opportunity to review this. Are there any questions or corrections regarding the minutes as published? Hearing none, and before calling for a vote, I'll indicate that State Attorney David Ehrenberg is now in attendance. And Mr. Ehrenberg, we're just reviewing the minutes from November 12th prior to voting on accepting them. As I asked, are there any members of the committee with any questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes from November 12, 2015 as published?
I make a motion.
Member Lafredo has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second is Member Pearman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, similar sign. Hearing none, the minutes from November 15, 2015 are passed and accepted as published. At this point, I would indicate that Public Defender Howard is here in attendance. It's great. You haven't missed much. You're here just in time for the real stuff.
I can't believe Mr. Ehrenberg got here before I.
Neither can I, but that's okay. I was having similar thoughts. But at any rate, I will turn this discussion over to Inspector General Carey to review his 6-month status report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, honorable IG committee members.
Good morning.
This will be our 6-month update on our activities. This is what we're going to cover today: our mission activities, budget, lawsuit updates, some legal issues, and then plans, objectives for the future. Again, we always start out, I'd like to go over again our mission, not only for the committee, but for the public who's watching. The mission is to provide independent and objective insight, oversight, and foresight in promoting effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in government. And ultimately, it's enhancing public trust in government.
General Carey, I'd like to ask one question about your mission statement. Are there any plans? I don't know the last time it was actually reviewed. Prior, subsequent to adoption, initial adoption. Do you have any plans to review this and perhaps just revisit it on either a non-recurring or just ad hoc basis?
Yeah, yes, sir, thank you for the question. By the end of this fiscal year, we're going to start looking at our strategic plan out again. So we're going to update the strategic plan for the future years. And we'll look at that again. When I came into the office, it's been in June, it'll be 2 years since I've been here. I know. Time flies when you're having fun. It's a great office, great time. But when I first came in, we looked at the mission and we revised our mission somewhat initially. And so by the end of this year, looking at our strategic plan, we'll take a re-look at that.
That's great. I think consistency between the two is important.
Yes.
Thanks.
And then, again, this is our mission put in pictorial viewing, but it's also more than a mission. It's an approach. It's our philosophy about how we do our work. And the first we always talk about insight is helping good people do things better. Good people in government make government better, because most of the folks we work with at all levels of government, elected and non-elected appointed folks, are there trying to do the best they can. And we come along as outside independent evaluators, people to take a look from an outside perspective, and we help, again, good people do things better. We do that through our audits and evaluations and making good recommendations even from our investigations often. And then oversight, which again most people classically know IGs for, is that oversight is holding government accountable for our taxpayers' dollars and accountable for the powers that we give our government. And then foresight is always looking forward, always looking ahead of how to make, again, putting the government, making it better, but also preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. And we always say that if you're not focused on these three things, then you're not doing a total IG job, because an IG job is just not about, again, what a lot of people think about, holding government accountable. Yes, critically important, but it's about making government better, working with good people, and more importantly, educating, working to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, to promote and share best practices. So this is, it's not only a mission, but it's a philosophy in the way we do our work. So our responsibilities by the IG ordinance is to, again, publish our reports, meet with the IG committee every 6 months, and publish our plan. And so now we're going to go into our activities, give an update on the activities for the last 6 months in the different categories that we work in the office. Intake and investigations. These are our activities as far as information that has come in over the past 6 months compared to the previous 6 months. As you can see, fairly consistent, and this has been consistent with the past, again, even 6-month periods before this. The type of calls that come into the office, the written correspondence, and then broken down under that is the 84 complaints that came out of all the calls and correspondence, then resulted in 4 investigations or 4 investigative activities, 3 investigations, 1 turned over to contract oversight, and then the number of public requests that we get. Number of public requests, as you see, this time has gone down significantly during this 6-month period. Now, I like to emphasize, to put this graph in perspective, the first 2 categories up at the top, number of calls that came in and written correspondence, that equals out to 536 calls and correspondences and things that come into the office. So we have, again, at this level, hundreds of calls, complaints, correspondence that come into the office. Every one of those, when they come into the office, then we do an analysis of that. And it takes time, and the person who heads up, this is a lot of business that doing all of this process. Miss Evangeline Rentz, here as our intake manager, heads this up for us. And bringing all this information in, we do an analysis. A lot of the information that we get is informational, because some of the information are not complaints or not actually addressed to us. Some of those information that comes to us are citizens who copy the IG when they have a complaint against their government, against the county or one of the municipalities, because by copying us, 1, they want to make us aware of that, and 2, they want to let their government know the IG also is aware of this. Now, we get that as information, but we still look at that and we do an analysis of it, and if it's serious enough that we should get involved, we will. But there's a lot of information that we're also copying. Now, and then there's a lot of that information too that is other jurisdictions that come in, because we're the office that the public knows they can call, and when in doubt, we have a complaint, we have a concern, it comes to us. Some of those, then the correspondence or complaints may go to the Commission on Ethics, if it's clearly an ethics issue. And Dave, thank you so much for coming in here today. I appreciate the Commission on Ethics representation today here that's coming into us. So some of them may go to the Commission on Ethics, some of them may go to other state agencies that have jurisdiction, or federal agencies. So when we get those, we send those to the agency, we forward it over to them, and we also get back to the person who made that complaint and give them the point of contact over at that other agency. We just don't say, not my job. We make sure we follow up and get that citizen or employee, government employee, linked up with the right office. Then we get down now to a smaller category of all those things that fall within our jurisdiction. And we look at those for evidence about the complaint. And we tell everybody, we just don't investigate rumors. We have to have some type of evidence based. You know, you believe you saw a city commissioner committing, doing something wrong. We ask them, okay, what's the basis of that? And it's just not, we can't take it just based on a rumor, or I heard, or this is what people believe. We ask for evidence. And if there's not sufficient evidence, then we send it back, we get back with the complainant, and we tell them we're closing this case, but however, if you have more evidence, if you have something, bring it to us. So it's not closed for them, we just don't tell them no, but we tell them here's what we need if we want to pursue that any more. And then we go down as that bucket, it gets smaller and smaller in the funnel. A number of the complaints that we get in are of the nature that really doesn't require or should not take the resources of the IG to handle. For example, there's a complaint, we get a complaint because a city receptionist, an intake person, has been rude to him. Or we get a complaint that I call into the one city office or a county office and nobody returns my call. Well, a lot of those we refer to the agency for appropriate action. So they'll know this is a complaint and they need to get back to the citizen, and there's no need to get back with us. Then the next two categories are more investigative in nature. It may come to the point of a management inquiry where we're not going to, at this point, get involved in a direct IG investigators going out, but we're assigning it to the county, one of the municipalities, solid waste or children's services, and we're saying, would you look into this matter, provide us back information, and if the information that we receive back, then we do an analysis. If it makes sense to us and satisfies the complaint, we'll do an analysis, and then we'll get back to the complainant and say that they've conducted inquiry, we have reviewed that, we may have asked some more questions, and we concur with that. And so it's closed, and it gives them an answer that this has been taken care of. And sometimes they find things and they take corrective actions on that. There may be another time where they do that management inquiry, but it still did not answer all of the questions that we have, or we think this is still serious enough that it's just not enough information. We need to now assign an investigator. And then down, that's the last category, where I have 4 investigators, to include Jeff Himmel, in charge of the investigative team. So there's a total of 4 people to do all these investigations that we will actually assign an investigator and conduct the investigation. So that kind of is the other side of the picture of how, of all those hundreds of calls and complaints, how it funnels down into the 4 actual investigations or contract oversight activities that we're conducting out of that. Again, total correspondence. These are the correspondence as it relates to people sending in correspondence and complaints, the different categories. The trend continues. Most of the correspondence and the complaints that come in are related to the cities or the municipalities. And that's the trend that's been going on. And then we have the county and other. And again, a lot of this other is at categories in other people's jurisdictions that we refer to other jurisdictions. Then the sources of the complaint, again, this remains consistent with what we've been seeing in the past. Most of our complaints and correspondence come from citizens. Again, a large category from anonymous, And those anonymous complainants, by and large, are often government employees who wish to remain anonymous for fear, whether real or not perceived, of potential retaliation. So a good portion of government employees wish to remain anonymous. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, could I? On that chart, when you say county and municipalities, are those employees of the county and municipalities, or are those actual referrals from government?
Those are in the county and the column on the right, government, who are municipalities. Those are actually people, for example, look at the very top, the green bar on the top of that, the green portion. Those are county employees who
Okay.
came to us and identified themselves and weren't, they gave their identity to us that we're making a complaint or a correspondence. So those people who are self-identified as employees.
Okay, so that was my question. It's not the county making a referral, it's an employee.
It's employees, though it may be
Sometimes.
the employees of senior leadership also. So it
Right.
includes anybody from a newly hired county employee to, it could be a county administrator or the Board of Commissioners.
Okay,
At times, we've had city council members and county commissioners who have come to us and asked us to investigate matters.
right.
So that could include,
There is some mandatory reporting
yes,
requirements, so I see.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, there's no trend that we've seen. This is the county correspondence related to different county offices. And we haven't had a real trend. The top is the current 6 months, and the bottom's the previous 6 months. There's not really any real trends we're seeing in offices that we're getting information about the county. Planning and zoning, again, there's a number of issues in the county right now about our planning and zoning, and so those are some of the hot topics that people have sent correspondence or complaints to us. Now, with the cities, the trend continues. So, and this has been the trend even not the last 6 months, but before. We see Delray Beach, Riviera Beach, and West Palm Beach are often in the mix, and Loxahatchee Groves. Though I do want to point out in these, this is total number of correspondence and complaints that come in. This includes multiple complaints and can be deceiving. For example, in Delray Beach, there's 24 complaints. 14 of those correspondence and complaints came from one individual. So one person can, so it may or may not show there is a problem there. And we do analysis of this, and we put all of these factors at the end of the fiscal year, go into our planning for audits, our risk management, and we look, is this one person? And even if it is one person, that one person, they may be very valid complaints and correspondence. So we look at them all on a case-by-case basis, but so just the mere volume of complaints may or may not indicate that there's a higher risk. Riviera Beach, they had 19 complaints. 10 of those complaints came from the same person. So different complaints, but one person. So it's the number of complaints. But we do an analysis inside, again, for a risk assessment, and every one of them that come in, again, if it is the same person that comes in, we seriously do an analysis of every single complaint or correspondence that comes in, whether that same person lodges one complaint or hundreds of complaints. They take the same amount of professional observation and analysis on what we're going to do with that complaint. Here are the categories, generally the same. Employee misconduct are things like categories of theft of time, bribery, violations of different policies, contract improprieties, or things like complaints against violations of the cone of silence, public notice, issues like that, financial improprieties, issues like fraud, mismanagement, misuse of allocated funds. And now we get down strictly to our investigations that we're conducting during this period. Investigations, these are investigations that were initiated during this 6-month period compared to last. You can see we've gone down. Now, on the self-initiated inquiries, if you see, well, there's not any compared to last month, we had 6. The background, more information about this, the last time I reported, Jeff Himmel, again, that's part of his expertise that he brought to this office from his previous experiences looking at data mining, red flags. So we self-initiated a number of inquiries, not investigation, but just areas where we're looking into areas that across the country that there is often problems, major construction, major dollars. So we're looking at a number of areas and we're just gathering information, looking for red flags that may or may not turn into an investigation, but there's something we should look at. Now, of those 6, again, we have 4 investigators, so our plate was pretty full. We're still looking at, I think, 5 out of the 6 of these inquiries that came in last time. So they take time. A lot of these take a lot of time to continue gather data, and so we did not self-initiate any new inquiries during this period because those continue on. Again, cases referred to the Public Corruption Unit in the State Attorney's Office too, and we'll talk about those later. Issued reports for and recommended actions. And just to show you there, even though our investigations and reports, some of the numbers fluctuate, sometimes recommendations we find can go up. So there's more things that we find that there's places either one to correct during this period, or we found opportunities to be more efficient and effective that we've made recommendations out of that. So they're not necessarily, one investigation may have 1 recommendation. Another investigation may have 10, because every investigation, audit, review is unique in and of itself, and so you really can't find trends. Just currently, we have 9 open investigations that are ongoing, and we have a total of 7 self-initiated inquiries that we're looking into. Okay, now we're going to talk about the couple investigations, the reports that we issued during this time.
Before you go
Yes, sir.
forward, if you'd go back to that previous slide. In the previous 6 months, there were 5 corrective actions recommended. In the current, it's 16. Is it fair to say that of the corrective actions recommendations accepted being 16, that would include some of the 5 from the previous period? Or is it all 16 from the current period?
That's of the current period. Of the 4 reports issued this period, those 4 reports totaled out recommending 16 recommendations, of which 16 were accepted.
Okay.
And so this is, and we're going to show later on, not only here, which is another very positive aspect, 100% acceptance rate of our recommendations. And you'll see later on, not only in investigations, but contract oversight and audits. And that's a very positive effect that the IG comes in and they find things that may be wrong, or we can make things better. But at the point where we find something that is wrong or that we can make things better, at that point we usually work with the municipality or the county or solid waste or children's services to talk about a good solution. If it's not obvious, let's talk about a solution to how are we going to make this better. And so in working with them, you get a higher percent of acceptance, because we don't want to just make recommendations that are really non-achievable. I mean, it's nice if you could make a recommendation, but if it's really, that's way too out there. That just cannot be realistically accomplished for a number of reasons. Well, let's talk about a realistic solution or way ahead to make this thing better. And so you work with management, and you get a lot more positive things accomplished.
So here's my follow-up question based on what you just said. My recollection is that in previous reporting periods, that acceptance ratio was not 100%. There was substantially more pushback.
Yes, sir. We had 94% overall, and so the office has done historically better, higher on acceptance rates. We have done, even in the previous Inspector General's time, it improved acceptance rate by the time at the end of her administration tour, and has been continually going higher since I've been here. And again, it shows the good relationship overall that we have with the folks that we provide this oversight and insight to try to make things better. Again, sometimes they don't, there are times when they may not agree with some of the things we've found, but when it comes to recommendations about a way ahead, they're on board.
Okay. I guess that kind of what's in the back of my mind as somebody who deals with this kind of thing on a regular basis is sometimes if you don't get enough pushback, maybe you're not being aggressive enough,
Exactly.
and that would be my follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you for that, that insight. That is true, and I've seen there are some IGs you have to watch, and we've talked about that, and you're trying to be the balance. You don't want to be the attack dog and just make things and attack them, but on the other hand, you don't want to be the lap dog of just a nice, friendly dog on your lap that you pet and never say anything offensive, never make recommendations that are wrong. We tried to be the guard dog or the watchdog, and you're right. This time we've had 100%. That may or may not, in and of itself, sometimes with IGs who get so high, if that's consistently all the time, then that may also indicate some problem. Now, but there's another issue too, another factor. Not all recommendations that are accepted are implemented. And so I've got a chart later on in the brief that we do a follow-up, and we try to, quarterly we follow up, and then we're going to issue in our annual report significant recommendations that were not implemented. And all of these that you will see later on were accepted. So management, oh yes, we're on board, IG, but then it comes down to, are you really going to implement those things? And so that's where we have to follow up and do some hard work. And we try to work with management. They've agreed to these recommendations, so we try to work with them. Okay, now that's the proof in the pudding, getting it done. And if they don't, then we make it public here, we make it public in our reports, and so it might take some public pressure on the cities, the counties, the different organizations to do the right thing.
Got it.
Thank you, sir. That's a very excellent point. Okay, the investigation in the environmental resources in the county, we found that one county employee falsified some of the county documents basically so he could use the county vehicle for personal use, take it places that he was should be not going, and he was using his vehicle for personal use. Also, which was even worse than that, he would use his county vehicle while on duty to go to a local shop that was working on his personal car, and he didn't get the price that he wanted from the person who was working on his car. And then he started asking questions about his business inspected, and he falsely said that he was an inspector. He was not. He worked in an inspection office, but indicated that we may have to inspect your business here if I don't get the price I need. Well, the merchant called our office immediately. They did not accept that, and they called our office and complained, and we investigated, and we found out he did use his office improperly to try to intimidate the vendor to do his thing. So we found that was supported. Low dollars, but this shows not all things that IG do. That's kind of the other issue we talked about on metrics and looking for effectiveness. And you can get in trouble as an IG if you only take those cases or you only look at things that's going to provide high dollars. It's about integrity. It's about making sure the government is accountable, in this area, accountable for the trust that we give them. So this was a low dollar, but it was a high impact that this person was doing the wrong thing. The county terminated this person. We referred this also to the Public Corruption Unit, and it didn't meet the threshold for their office to continue on a criminal investigation, particularly because, it's, again, for a number of different reasons, their office will take on cases or not. Next case was the, again, no dollars here, but this was another significant case in the medical examiner's office. Leo Allen, I think Leo's here right now, led this case, investigator who's helping in the management portion right now of investigations, led this case. We had somebody in the medical examiner's office was using the computer, the internet, to do his personal business on our time, low amount of time. We couldn't get the exact amount of time, but they were using the computer to do private business, going to websites, interfering with his productivity, and more than that, too, he violated the county's policy and merit rules and state statutes that he was disseminating some of the public records which were exempt from disclosure to now these were other people in law enforcement that he was sending some information to, but it wasn't relationships that we had, professional, established relationships that he was authorized to send the information to. So we found that he was improperly, again, sending this information out, and the person retired in the meantime. So he retired after our investigation. It was his time to retire, and he decided to retire. Now this is a case, and I have a number of slides kind of related to this, because this was involved with our investigative side got to work on this. It started in audits, and it also then went over to the Public Corruption Unit, the state's attorney's office, where they made arrests. So eventually, again, I'll talk just a little bit later more about the more details on this, but started in an audit, came over to our investigations, that we found that basically these three individuals had set up a company in Delray Beach. They set up a private company, and they were selling street signs and different materials to the city. Well, that's wrong in and of itself, that they didn't declare that they had this business selling things to the city. But even worse, on top of all that, of all the invoices and all this that was coming in, the city was receiving a fraction of these street signs and equipment, and they were getting paid by the city for street signs that never came, to the tune of, again, over $129,000 of signs and materials that the city should have been obtaining but did not. And so that, again, went to the state attorney's office eventually. And again, these individuals were arrested on 2 counts, an organized scheme to defraud, first-degree felony, and grand theft over $100,000. And I think the trial, it's on the trial docket for next week. It's coming to trial, I think on the 17th, isn't it? I think 19th. So it's another example of how we work together closely with the state attorney's office. Now this one again was in the news quite a bit here recently. This was our investigation on Palmtran. Again, and this shows how it really, integrity in government is a team effort. It involves so many people. This initially came to us from a complainant inside government at Palmtran. So they brought that to us. And statistically across the country, in fact across the world, the majority of prosecutions and investigations and fraud that's uncovered comes from people with inside, whistleblowers, people who will bring this information forward. Now, we do our best, and we find fraud, waste, and abuse in what we're doing, and try to find things and look for those red flags. But across, statistically, the vast majority of wrongdoing that's uncovered is from individuals inside who bring that information forward. Again, this is a case in point. Somebody came to our office, brought information that they thought supervisors were changing the times, altering the times, or assigning dispatchers to alter the times of arrival times for Palm-Tran connection. And therefore, as a result of that, the ultimate goal, the reports that they were putting out to the county commission and to the public were inflated, inaccurate and inflated, because the times were being changed. And we did find that that was being done, thousands of occurrences. We made a number of recommendations to the county. The county has since, or Palm-Tran Connection, Palm-Tran has brought in another independent investigator to look at this, brought him in for a week, and they may have a report that comes out, but they've talked to us, and it, in essence, substantiated all the information that we had, and it was a technical person to kind of look at, okay, technically what can they do with some recommendations. So, again, this was not big dollars that were identified, but this was a critical issue of the population that was being affected here in the Palm-Tran connection. These are the elderly, the disabled, the people who need public transportation, who we commit our dollars to them to go pick them up, to take them to their doctor's appointments, to take them to where they need to be, any place they need to be taken and picked up. And this is a population that depends on us, that we were able to uncover and again, hopefully be a better servant to that population and make better use of our money that's allocated. A lot of it's federal dollars that are allocated for this program. And again, and I must say too, give credit to Jeff Himmel on this, and Rob Fleckus was our investigator on this case. That, I mean, this took a lot of digging over months because it was very complicated looking at the data system, just trying to understand their system on how they tracked information. And there was a lot of, let's say, hesitancy for people inside to talk to us, that it took a lot of interviews and a lot of digging over months to finally confront individuals with data and the facts where they would talk to us about and once we got people talking about it, then it came on. But sometimes investigations, that's why it's difficult to put a time limit on an investigation. Some of them are very quick, but some of them take a lot of time and effort, and due to the diligence of both Jeff and Rob, I mean, they stuck with this, and they uncovered some very significant information that we need to correct in the county. Contract oversight. And again, contract oversight is our division, does a lot of that foresight, prevention out there in front, and also does a lot of insight in providing good advice to staffs that are looking at contract, looking at procurement activities. Again, they're out and about. Their mission is to try to reduce the appearance of and the opportunity of vendor favoritism, inspire public confidence, that our contracts are being awarded equitably and economically. And again, they routinely go to our selection committee meetings. And these are the amount of the current contracts monitored. That's a 50% increase from the last time. Our last 6 months, we were monitoring 57 contracts. This time, we went up, we were looking at 105. And the meetings that we attended this time, 59 meetings, that went up from 36 meetings we attended last time. And that's case dependent. It depends on the significance of the meetings. Sometimes the staff have other investigative activities that prevent them from attending a number of meetings. So the meetings can go up and down from the 6 months that we're looking at how many. And Dennis Yeski does a great job in charge of this. Dennis will come up in a minute. I'm going to ask him to speak about some trends in contract oversight in a minute. And here's the overall information from the reports. Again, 2 reports issued, recommendations made, identified in the question costs and avoidable cost. And you can see that is a dramatic downshift from the last time. But the last 6 months, that we had a very significant report. The last 6 months was on the Delray Beach trash removal system. And that was from where the last 6 months to where we recommended, it was in their city ordinance that they should go out and rebid for trash collection. They did not. Eventually went to court, and then they did rebid it. And so as a result of doing that, that took a number of years. Again, they saved the city, I think it was up to around $6 million of avoidable cost. And so there was some significant, dramatic savings in dollars amount in that one report, which really made that 6-month period look very extremely high. So that's not a benchmark. That's a tough benchmark to continually look forward there to. So here's one of their activities that we looked at, Water Utilities Department within the county. Again, we found that the County Review Committee, they deferred approval of 8 requests for final payment that didn't comply with the Government Prompt Payments Act. So there was some non-compliance we found. And we also found that they submitted a number of change orders and work authorizations they were at a very high rate of deferral items by the contract committee. And these deferrals, what the end result of that is that the committee's approval process, it delayed the process and also delayed the start date of projects. So it slowed down less effective business there. So that's an effectiveness operation that we found. Made 3 recommendations. The county accepted all 3 of the recommendations. In fact, have already implemented those, and those are at the bottom in the box there. Developed policies and made checklists, and they're looking at a routing process diagram. Next contract oversight activity. This was from the city of West Palm Beach, their contract monitoring activity. And we found that, again, they had some problems in documenting. They didn't have some policies and procedures in place, formal procedures in place. They didn't have policies and procedures in place or files. They didn't have some of the files that they needed in place. And also they didn't have a city risk assessment tool. We made 3 recommendations related to those 3 findings. The city accepted them, and they, again, very good relationship working with the city and trying to, as we're looking at this, they were very cooperative along the way. And as we made our recommendations, accepted them, welcomed them, and making changes. Audit highlights. Two reports, recommendations made and identified question cost. I'll talk about here our information on the reports. First one on the Village of Palm Springs, our Public Service Department. Again, John Lynch, I think John's here. Yeah, John, he led this audit, and I should note that Bob Bliss in charge of the audit division here, doing a good job here on focusing us, very technically focusing our efforts, doing a great job. John did this audit here, led the audit, found a lot of internal control weaknesses in their public service department, and that lists some of the major internal controls that he found in the findings. Not monitoring the fuel transactions. I won't read every one of those to you. But I know down at the bottom, no process for contract monitoring, not good. And no scrapping policy or procedure. And if you remember the last 6 months, we had some investigations on scrapping. If you don't have a policy and procedures on scrapping, you can get in trouble real quick because all of a sudden it leads to people scrapping things, putting it potentially in their own pocket, and it leads to problems if you just need to have some policies on that. Made 16 recommendations. All 16 were accepted. This just shows another good sign. They were accepted, and March 31st, 15 had been implemented. They were working along the way as we found these. They were implementing immediately. They weren't waiting on the report to come out. As soon as we pointed these out to them, they started making recommendations, or started making, excuse me, implementations. Delray Beach. This is one, Eleanor Lazinski. Lazinski, or Eleanor's here, led that audit here. Again, this was of their purchasing activities, and we found a lot of internal control problems there. They weren't obtaining 3 quotes as required by the ordinance, problems in their sole source, projects not having sufficient documentation. Purchase card, this is a problem often you find in government, split purchases to avoid, in using purchase cards, you have a limit on that, and so what happens, you split it so you can get around the policy of the limits of how much you can spend on that. So there was some split purchase card problems, problems in the segregations of duties in the warehouse, and no written policies. Again, of the 11 recommendations, 8 were implemented early on. Now, the criminal activity, again, this relates back to that other report on the 3 individuals who were arrested that went over to the state attorney's office. And here, I really want to highlight, is Keem's here, right? Was Keem here? Yes, Keem Torrey, who is our auditor working on that. This is a great example of our auditors are trained to look at compliance, efficiencies and effectiveness, but they're also trained to look for red flags. Keem, in just his normal audit work, early on in the investigation, all of a sudden saw a couple red flags. He saw that there was a business that was doing business with the city, and it also had the business address had the same address as one of the employees in the city. Not a good thing. Again, this had been going on for years. But we had a good auditor who was looking at detail, and because of him finding that anomaly, that something's not right, and he started digging a little bit more and more that this is not right. It looks like we have an employee who does not have an agreement or with the city to do business, is doing business with the city, and pulls over some things. He turns them over to the investigators, and as a result, here we are today. So that's a great work for Keem, and that's what a good auditor should be doing. Not only looking for those efficiencies and effectiveness, but looking for red flags of fraud, waste, and abuse. And because of him, all of this is come about today. Okay, so now I have my chart of how we work together. Again, this audit was all started from our risk assessment. So we do a risk assessment, and we found Delray, we need to be looking at them because it was a higher risk. So it started with our audit plan. Yes, ma'am.
So this was just initiated by the IG?
Our office.
By a complaint?
No, this audit all came about from our annual risk assessment plan of where we should be doing audits for the next following year. And so for this year, we said, hey, we need to be looking at Delray. There's some higher risk of some things that a number of different factors that went into it, and this was in our audit plan. So we initiated the audit. They started to commence the audit. Again, this is our audit staff initially identified some questionable transactions. These were these transactions that Keem started, hey, something's not right here. Then turned it over to our investigative staff who dug into it more. We found another $48,000. At that point, we saw, okay, this is criminal. This is some criminal activity here. So we get with our partners in the public corruption unit, and then they commence their investigation. That's where eventually they come out with the 3 arrests. They find an additional more $28,000 of questionable transactions. Again, we issue our report. We not only have the questionable transactions, but we also have other question cost of the ways the city should be doing business better. So that was from the previous slide okay, here's some ways that you need to be doing business better, that we're not accounting for our dollars as best as we could. We don't have the checks and balances in place. So this, again, just an example of how we all work together to, one, fight fraud, waste, and abuse, and to make our government better. Now, the next audit, this is John Lynch, too, did this one here. I think John, yes. John, again, did this one. We started a countywide, and this was in our audit plan for this year. We're doing a countywide fuel review, fleet and fuel review. So we're going and looking at different municipalities and organizations that we provide oversight, because historically there's been problems across the United States in fleet and fuel. So it's a risk. So we're looking at different areas, and then we're going to see, after we get a number of these areas looked at, city by city or organization by organization, and then look, are there any trends that we've seen through all of those? And we'll probably put out a capstone report as a result of that. But why I point this out, this did not end in a report. This did not end in a big reports and findings, because what happened, John went out to the village of Royal Palm Beach, and he saw they have everything. They've got some great checks and balances and things in place, and he noted that, okay, they've got a good, it looks like their program is a good, high, pretty well operating program. We made some suggestions, but we cut it off and did a report, or did a letter to the city council letting them know that things are going well out here, and we moved on. And this is an example. I think it's a success story, and this not only for Royal Palm Beach, but just to show you and the public that once we start down the line, it's not rigid. It's not, well, we said we're going to do an audit, and we're going to do an audit. We found there was no need for an audit here, so we can take our limited resources. We only have 8 auditors, and we'll move down the road and do something else. We're going to make a report, let you know this is good, and we're not going to waste your time or waste our time. We're going to move on down the road to another audit. And so this is, again, just a good example of some of the good things we find out there. And we try, and in our reports I meet about every 6 months. Separately, we do a group of municipal managers. I meet with them, and also with county leaders. Every time we take lessons learned from all our activities, and we convert a lot of this information and other things into, okay, here's some things to watch out for, but also here are some best practices and some things that we recommend that you institute in the future. So we meet with them to pass these on. Now, we talked about significant years. This is new to the committee, and I'm just to highlight this. We do follow up on significant recommendations that have not been implemented. And these, if they're not implemented, will be in this year's annual report. We had one with the county that we're still waiting on, a significant report that we had put out last year on the Public Works, where we had recommended that the county implement a policy on requiring employees with procurement responsibilities to recuse themselves in matters that involve those with whom they have a personal and private relationship that could reasonably be a perceived or actual conflict. County agreed with that. Again, working with it, they're very good agreeing with it. They're just having a little slowness on implementing that. And there's a number, everybody has all types of reasons why, but it still has not been implemented yet. City of Belle Glade went out there and did an audit, and again, issued in 2014. Where again, this was another case. Again, this goes to Chair Crydell's earlier question about that acceptance of recommendation. They readily accepted the recommendations, said, yeah, that's good, we'll do that. Sounds real good, but now it's been a number of years, and every time we get a response back. It's almost like somebody crosses out the date, and puts the last responses, yeah, we're going to do that when we get to it. And so we keep working with them to try and implement those recommendations. When we have, and there's their standard complaint every time, it's the same wording, that we don't know when we're going to do it, but we're going to do it, with our limited resources when we can get to it, which is, again, something we feel we need to be pointing out now to the commission and the public, that we think there are significant recommendations that need to be implemented. Because the IG has no authority, as you know, to make anybody do anything. We shine a light. We make recommendations, and it's the management that has to either make that, or the public to put the pressure on the management to make sure that things get done.
General, General,
Yes, sir.
when you make your list for audits, do you notify the cities that they're on their list?
Yes, we come up with an annual plan after our risk assessment, and our annual plan is submitted to all the folks that we provide oversight to, and it's also included in our annual, so in last year's annual report, it's also put as an addendum to our annual report. So they're notified, the public is notified, and that's a benefit in and of itself, because a lot of people take that and start, if I was a city and my name was on the list, I'd start getting ready. I'd start looking myself. That shows the IG's interested in me. I think I might take a look at that myself before they come.
Follow-up question
Yes.
to that. Actually, if you would go to the previous slide on the investigation into the Engineering and Public Works Department, that the recommendation was for the county to implement a policy for recusals. And you said that they're looking to implement, they're clarifying how to accomplish your recommendation, but then I see there were subsequent requests for updates to management 4 times since then that have not been responded to. I'm assuming as of today, they still have not been responded to?
Have not been, yes. They have not, the office in there hasn't been responding, though official response, we haven't had anything in writing other than, we're working on this, other than verbally, we're working on it. But we give a written, every time on our follow-ups, on our quarterly follow-ups, we do it in writing and ask the management, please respond, have you implemented this, or what's the status of it? And at times we've got, again, sometimes verbal, we're working on it, but we haven't had any formal actually process of really what's the process, and how's this going to get done?
So any indication as to what's being worked on or by whom?
No, I don't think we have any, no.
But you have no recourse.
That was my question.
For
This is a
enforcement.
recourse, and talk to, and again, I'm going to tell them myself too, I should have probably before here, I need to also at this level too, personally get with the city administrator, or the county administrator too, to work on this too.
But if they stonewall you, there's really nothing you can do.
Stonewall, this is what we do. And we put it at, this was public. We have, again, the public is the ultimate enforcers of our government. Public involvement, whether it's by voice or by vote.
This
That's
seems like a fairly easy recommendation to implement, to require employees to recuse themselves in matters that they're
policy.
involved. I mean, that
Yes.
should be almost a given, I would think. Have you been given any indication as to what the problem is with implementing this?
No, but again, we had an acceptance, all on board when this came about to the previous county administrator, who had immediately accepted all of them and said, yes, we definitely need to do it. And I just think So I couldn't speculate more on why, but yeah, we need to get it accomplished.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, if I may. So that is, you say requests for updates to management. Is that management of the Engineering and Public Works
Yes.
Department?
Yes.
And likewise with the city manager in Belglade, is there a point at which you sort of go a little higher?
Yes.
And in particular, the issue, of course, is the elected officials that ultimately are responsible for the workings of the department.
Yes.
What is the process for?
Well, thank you, that's a very good question, and we talk about this. At times, we bring things to, again, the elected officials or the higher appointed officials. And at times, we do that, and they're often case by case, and on when exactly we need to bring this to the level at those higher levels.
Okay, thanks.
And again, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I should have, Verdenia, if you're watching this, I apologize. I probably should have gone to Verdenia. I know I should have, not probably, I should have. So I apologize, Verdenia, as you watch this here, that I should have talked to you and not before this came. So thank you, that's a good discussion, I appreciate that. Now, this is the overall, and I kind of broke this down this time because last time, State Attorney Ehrenberg asked about some granularity on, okay, what's the money and what do I tell people on, what are they getting for the bucks of the IG? The bottom line, what are we getting? So I've not only put this up here with our dollars amount up at the top, you'll see our cost, but I'll some follow-on slides kind of break this down. First of all, money, efficiencies. Since the IG's been in existence, what it's cost the taxpayers around $12 million. And then the category on the right is return dollar-wise on investment, particularly in identified cost and potential avoidable cost. Those are actual recommendations we made to save the taxpayers' dollars. So you can see we've almost doubled what our cost is. Now, it doesn't include the top number is questionable cost. There's a number of efficiencies that we can find in questionable cost in doing business better, but we usually don't tack that specifically, don't categorize that as savings, because sometimes it's questionable costs can be things like you're not, like for example, you're not rebidding contracts as you should rebid a contract. You just continue to renew it. Because we really do not know how much they can save by doing it. And it's like in Delray, until they the money on Delray was not identified until they actually did go out and rebid the contract. Now we can identify that money. But initially, it may be cost savings in there, but we can't positively identify how much. So we put that in that category of question cost. And question cost can also be we're just basically not tracking our taxpayers' dollars the way we should be. We don't have receipts and accountability of the way we should be tracking. I'm not saying it's illegal what you're doing, but just I use the example of like we're individually, if you're ever audited by the Internal Revenue Service for your taxes, they come in and you say, I donated, whatever, $1,000 to some charity. You claim that. Well, they're going to come in and ask for your receipt. If you say, well, I don't have a receipt, but I did, and that's sometimes what happens with the city. We did, and so we're not arguing that you did make that donation or you did legitimately spend the money, but you got to keep track. You have to, keep track of what you're doing, and particularly in public service, we have to account for the dollars of our taxpayers. So a lot of that money is basically making sure that our government tracks and can account for the dollars that we spend.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I ask a question, please? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carey. Approximately how much has the Inspector General's office cost the taxpayers since its inception in 2010?
2010, $12 million.
So
Up there at
12
the
million?
top, yeah, $12 million. Since our inception,
Oh, there it is.
Or
I'm
12
sorry.
million, yeah,
There it
excuse
is.
me, 12
Okay.
million.
So 12 million versus potentially over 40 million in savings.
for, I would say, the two bottom categories there, that $1.9 million in identified costs and the $19.9 million, that's true, we can point at, that's some potential savings there. Again, if they're implemented. Because again, our recommendations are given to them, they're accepted, they have to implement them. I can't go and collect, we don't have authority to make them implement or collect dollars. These are recommendations we've made that they've been accepted. The people said, yeah, that is a good recommendation that will save us money, and we will do that. So it's over $20 million, over $21 million, so almost doubled in actual savings, that we could say actual or potential savings. And then the other 20 million is questionable. There's savings in there, but I don't honestly, it's not fair for me to claim there's all of that as actual return savings on the dollar. So that's our efficiency. So that's what we're getting, money-wise efficiency for the IG. Now, effectiveness, making government better, more effective, is in our recommendations. And again, we have, the recommendations that we made this time, total of 47, and yes, this time we had 100%. But overall, we have a 94% acceptance rate over the years of all of our recommendations. So we're working to make government better, more effective. And that's how we're doing it, by our recommendations. And then integrity, or that other aspect of what we do, holding government accountable, integrity-wise, is all those calls and correspondence that citizens, people in government, again, we get calls and requests at all levels of people who don't have any place else to go, and again, a lot of them want to remain anonymous. I have city council members who make anonymous complaints. I've had county commissioners who want to make anonymous complaints that would not otherwise, that we can look into that and keep them out of it, of something that should be looked in. So integrity-wise, we're the office that somebody can come to that they suspect wrongdoing, and they know we'll look into it. We'll give an honest, objective look at that issue. Again, at all levels, from business, a lot of business folks who do business with our government, to citizens, to people at all levels in government. And ultimately, we provide that trust in government. We provide the citizens that there's somebody out there. We've got a number of people who obviously were, as public stewards, looking out for our citizens. But we're a special office that look out, that by charter, independently and objectively conduct these investigations, audits, and contract oversight. Now, trends for public defender Howitt. I know you've asked trends before. Trends are really tough, and again, they take years and years to look at and really develop trends. These are the best I could do on trends right now. Overall, I mean, in our audits, you could just see it this time. Overall, audits, investigations, and contract oversight, in all of our projects, we find problems with weak or no internal controls. Internal controls are everything from, a lot of times, having a written formal policy in place, where they just do things because that's the way they've been done and history's passed it down. So a lot of times we find there's not policy in place or sufficient policies. There's a lack of training as internal controls. There's a lack of management oversight. You might have a policy, but then nobody follows up on oversight. Segregation of duties. Some of these problems we came into this time, the investigation, the audit that came out of the individuals selling signs, segregation of duties will stop problems from happening often. So generally speaking, a number of different problems in internal controls that we continually, and again, we continually make recommendations. Again, a lot of these recommendations that continue, we put those out, we categorize them, and we put them in tips and trends and papers to try and educate management. Here are things that we're finding problems, but also we like to put things out in best practices. Now, also we find a lot of trends in issues in contract selection committee issues. And for this, I'm going to ask Dennis Yeski, again, who's head of my contract oversight division, if you don't mind, have him just talk about take a couple minutes, no more than a couple minutes, talk about some of the issues and then some of the best practices we put out. So if you don't mind, I'll have Dennis come up here and talk about that for a minute.
Mr. Yeski?
Dennis?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Selection committees or evaluation teams play an important and essential role in the request for proposal process and the contracting process. Members are responsible for reading, reviewing, scoring, rating, ranking proposals, and resulting in a contract award recommendation. Often these contract awards are valued at millions of dollars, provide essential municipal services, and often provide highly complex or technical services to the citizens, and very often include services to vulnerable populations. As you know, our contract oversight staff go out and we observe selection committee meetings, and some of the issues that we've identified in observing these meetings are there's an uncertainty by committee members on how to evaluate or score proposals. There's a lack of clarity on the process involved with the selection committee. Members aren't certain about their roles and responsibilities on the committee. At times, we've seen a departure from the RFP criteria, and there are certain times there's an unawareness or an uncertainty about any statutory requirements imposed on the selection committees. And often we see just simply mathematical errors in scoring up the process and getting to that final number. We in contract oversight maintain a library of resources and guidance that we can use to provide to municipalities or the county on particular issues. One particular guidebook that's been helpful for us is the state of Florida has a public procurement guidebook, and has a good section on preparing the evaluation team for participating in reviewing proposals. We've observed a couple years ago, we did a report on the Children's Services Council, and they've really done a good job of implementing all the elements that are addressed in that public procurement guide. And they include, they have a what they call a rating tool and process meeting, and they have this prior to selection committee members even getting a proposal for them to begin to review. And what they do is they go over key dates to remember, what are the timelines, what are the dates of the evaluation meetings, maybe oral presentations that are coming up, when is the negotiation period, when is the contract anticipated to be awarded. They review and discuss sunshine law. They discuss confidentiality of proposals. They sign off on a conflict of interest. And then they have a good portion of the meeting, they talk about the actual rating tool itself. So they go over the questions and the factors they're going to be looking at for rating. They're going to be looking at weight factors if there are any, and they talk about consistency in the ratings. And then lastly, they cover an area on administrative areas when they can expect to receive the proposals, reminded to bring their proposals with them to the meeting, and generally come prepared to discuss and review the proposals. And lastly, what they do, I think, which is very beneficial, is after they've completed their review and rating of the proposals, and they've made their contract award recommendation, they reconvene as a selection committee, and they look at, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve, what we planned out to do, did that happen? How can we make the system better? And they have an improvement loop there, if you will, to improve the process. So specifically to address those issues, that's what we provide to municipalities. We refer them to. We want to be a partner with them. We want to provide them some insight and help them do a better job. So often we'll refer them to materials we have, to the report on the Children's Services Council, and any other information we may think is helpful and provide guidance. Are there any questions?
It sounds to me that the issues that you face relative to procurement issues are not terribly dissimilar to that in the private sector. It's the same issues, the same processes, the same breakdowns. And I think that your approach of education probably is somewhat better than the private sector on an overall basis. So I think it's well constructed.
Thank you. Turn it over to General Carey.
Dennis, his group just does an outstanding job. And again, that's an example of trying to share best practices. And if everybody would do it the way, what we highlighted Children's Services is like, that's a good model. And so often we find out that, again, organizations, I mean, we are spending, as you know, millions of dollars on these projects. And committee members are often selected without expertise or knowledge or given much guidance, and we give them a lot of training on a lot of other things, but you come together to make decisions on millions of dollars, and they, again, good people don't have the tools they need to make the decisions they need to. So that's selection committee issues. Then on employee misconduct. Boy, that is all over the place. So there is no trends on, what is the employee misconduct? It is just all over the place. Though the common things, which this is no surprise, the misconduct is based on, again, the motive for personal gain. And it may be money, maybe just favor, so not all necessarily money. And again, back to that lack of management oversight. What we do find a lot of times in our misconduct cases are places where we didn't have the proper internal controls in place. Although the individuals obviously are responsible for their misconduct. But it's important that we have management oversight, managers, supervisors who are watching and providing proper oversight and checks and balances and segregations of duties that would prevent sometimes people who are thinking about doing something bad. It's like leaving the keys in your car. You try to don't do that. So we don't want to tempt people who potentially want to do wrong. So we need to do better often in our management oversight. Okay, now for our outreach. Again, this is during that 6-month period. I'm the one who usually speak to most of the folks. 419 individuals within government, training, presentations that we do for them. To citizens, 677 presentations I've made to the public. Media, comments and contacts, and most of those are responsive to the media contacting me as a result of reports that we issue. And so we respond to the media. And then education things, and I'm going to list some of these. Here are some of the things that we've done, publications we put out. Again, you just received our newsletter. We put out a quarterly newsletter. During this time, of course, we issued our annual report. During the last 6 months, Lee County they had a charter review committee established, and they were looking at things now, updating their committee, and they were looking at the possibility of having an Inspector General Commission on Ethics type, and as we do here. And so they had me and Mark Bannon. And Mark, I apologize to you. You've already been called initially in a public meeting, I think Steve first, and I called you Dave. Mark Bannon, my partner, over there. So again, Mark and I went over to Lee County and gave presentations on the history of how we were set up and what we were doing. So we went over there during this time. I went to the Florida Audit Forum, which was in Tampa, and that is a forum of all it's a voluntary association of Florida internal auditors and IGs who meet a couple times a year, and they usually do in Tampa. And they asked me to come and speak. Particularly, they had me speak on communications, how should IGs and internal auditors communicate, and give them some tips, at least of some things I've learned over the years, to IG and audit committee members, to the public, to the various individuals who we need to communicate with. So I shared with them some of the things, the way we do business here in Palm Beach County. We told you last time, we established an internal Palm Beach County internal auditor and inspector general forum of all the municipal internal auditors and there are the few IGs, the school board IG, the clerk of the court IG, that we meet together quarterly and discuss common issues and share our best practices to try and help each other. I went out to the National Ethics Bowl. I was a judge again this year at the Ethics Bowl. I went out to Suncoast High School on their career day and talked about ethics in government and some of the things we do. So these are some of the things I've done. Now, one of a big accomplishment that I had on my plate that I wanted to do was to develop this manual, and we got this done during this time. And it's a manual now that we give to every new city manager, and we've passed it out and bring it to leaders in government, that really to break our ordinance down and all this down and to try and make it more plain people speak. Okay, the bottom line is what's the IG's authority and what do we do, and what if they do an audit, what should I expect if they come out, and two, what are my responsibilities as a city, what are my basic responsibilities that I have to accomplish. And so we put this down as just a desk reference for them. Again, we've hand-delivered it, sent it out to a lot of people, and every new now city manager or new leader that comes on board will give them a copy of this also. It's been well received. Again, March was Ethics Awareness Month. And again, Mark and I was on a panel with State Attorney Ehrenberg out at Palm Beach State for the public, a public discussion on ethics and how we all work together. Mark and I, we put together this poster. It was posted in the municipalities, and here at the county, it was on every floor. I noticed that they put it up on every floor of the county. The poster was well published. And also down there, I did a public service announcement, a commercial on Ethics Awareness Month that was put out on Channel 20. And I was told some of the stations, the local TV stations, I never saw it because I usually am not awake at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when they play these public service announcements. Budget, staffing, again, this is our standard budget, what we have, 2.9 budget, and kind of what we're getting, some of the things we're getting for our budget. I like to put that up. It's about, and it varies anywhere from $1.69 to $1.71, what the average person in the county pays for the IG. And that's not including all the money that they get back in our identified cost and avoidable costs. That's if there was no money at all that we recovered, that's what it cost, less than a Starbucks cup of coffee. So that's right, a lot less, depending on what you know, that's a basic, small cup, what you get. Now, and I want to just point out too, Debbie Brooks, where's Debbie Brooks right here, is not only the person that contacts you, my executive assistant, but she is also our budget. She's a financial analyst and prepares our budget. So she's our budget person, she's our property person, she's our human resource person. When I was at my last job, I had a whole staff of people who do the types of support services, and I come here and I find out it's this one person and I'm scared. But Debbie does she just does so well with all the hats that she wears. She just does a great job, and I want to thank you. Lawsuit update. We did have some activity on this during this 6-month period. Finally, as you know, it was appealed by the cities. And the cities then initially, they filed their brief. The county then filed a counter to their brief. And then the cities then filed another counter to the county's brief. And so now it's sitting at the 4th District Court of Appeals since March 31st. And again, the relevant issues, the cities contend that, again, they're challenging not the existence. Again, they've never challenged the existence or the authorities of the IG or the jurisdiction. It's about the money. It's about how it's going to be paid for. And basically, they say, this is a quote from their papers they put in, that the county, quote, can't force the municipalities to pay for it, us. Though, again, and they're countering what Judge Brunson said, who heard the case. It said the people are the municipalities, and the officials who represent the people may not undermine the electoral process because they disagree with the vote of the people. So that's the issues involved, waiting for the District Court of Appeals. Yes, ma'am. 13 cities are still, it was originally 15, and in the process, 2 cities have dropped out.
That's what I
So
thought.
now we have 13 cities in the appeal of 38.
Okay, thank you.
General?
Ms. Pearman?
And do you monitor those cities that are in this lawsuit or
Yes,
this
we,
appeal?
and in fact, thank you for bringing that point up. I'm often asked, do you provide these cities who are suing, do I monitor, provide? We provide the same service to all cities, whether they are in the lawsuit, out of the lawsuit. Some of the cities who are even not suing, some of them are voluntarily paying, some of them are not. Very few, I try to pay no attention to that because I'm the IG and we try to give independent, objective oversight of the cities. And so I don't want to give any impression that, okay, I'm not going to provide you oversight, or on the other hand, that I'm giving you extra punishment. We're going to do our job no matter how much money, we get, where we get it from, who likes us, who doesn't like us. We're going to keep doing our job the way we're supposed to. Again, I tell folks, we're designed for 40 people to give full service to both the county and the services, but they cut us off midway when this lawsuit began at 23. So we'll do the best we can with what we have, as long as we have those 23. And when it's done, we'll do even better for providing more insight, oversight, and foresight. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Thank you. And do you find any difference in the cooperation you're from the municipalities based on their involvement in the lawsuit or not?
Now, pleasantly, since I've been here, my predecessor, it was a little different, but since I've been here, I have not found any difference in cooperation.
Great.
There are some of the cities who are leading the charge, who we've been involved, who, from a professional working level, very cooperative, very good relationship with. So that's
Good.
Mike, you had something?
I had a question, but I can't think of it right now.
Let me know later. That's good. Please continue.
So a couple other legislative initiatives related, while we're talking about the law. There were 2 significant legislative, these bills were passed in this year's Florida legislation. The first one was, we had a sunset provision on, and this affects all IGs across the state, at the state level and the local level, that there was a sunset provision that all of our reports and investigations and audits in the process, from the complaint process up until the time we issue a report, were exempt from public disclosure. And that's so we could do our job and we don't have the public involved, and then everything is open once the report is issued. That was set, there was a sunset provision on that. So that now is permanent. That got passed for IGs across it. They are permanent. And the other provision was, let me back up too. On both of these issues, Calinthia Dillard, our general counsel, where are you, Calinthia? Right here. I got to tell you, I just am so fortunate to have Calinthia here. What a great counsel that I have with her. When she came in, again, she hit the deck running, working for us here. She led the state on both of these initiatives. And particularly this second initiative, when she came in, one of the discussions we had, in law enforcement, they have exemptions for police officers, people doing investigations. Judges have this. A number of people who are doing sensitive investigative work, that their home address, their phone numbers, their children's information of where they go to school is exempt from public disclosure. And Calinthia was talking like, well, hey, why aren't we? Why doesn't IGs? This is the type of stuff that we do is pretty sensitive. As you saw, people get arrested, careers, we make people unhappy. Can you believe it or not? There's a number of people that we make unhappy. He says, why aren't we underneath that provision? And I said, well, I don't know. That's a good question. Why don't you pursue this? And she pursued it, wrote the draft legislation, worked with the legislators, worked with all the other state IGs and internal auditors to come up with a proposal that eventually did pass in the state legislature, that now not only all our office, but all IGs across the state and internal auditors, their personal information is protected from disclosure because of the very sensitive nature of the work that we do. So again, congratulations on her. And oh, by the way, she also won from the, during this time, I sent you the note from the Women's Chamber of Commerce, the Giraffe Award for, again, women who stick their neck out, what's called after, for other people trying to improve and be a mentor to so many other people and being a volunteer for all the other things outside of her professional work. So great job, Calinthia. I really do appreciate her. Okay, where are we going? We're still going the same place we started. We're moving to lead as a catalyst for positive change throughout the local governments and public organizations in Palm Beach County, with an inspired and skilled staff that strives for continuous improvement. That's where we're going. That's our vision. And to do that, again, to turn that into reality, again, it's leadership at every level. It's having everybody in the office involved. It's staff development. We've committed resources and we've spent money that was in our budget. So it's not over budget. Money that's in our budget that had not been spent before as much, to send our people, all of our folks, to the right schools to get the education and skills and to hone our skills so we can be even better at what we do. So we're sending our staff to more skills and bringing people internally to develop the staff. And then teamwork, working inside and with the government to do things better. Doing that with our limited resources. Again, we focus on risk assessment. That's when you have, you should do a risk assessment all the time, but it's particularly important when you have such a small staff that we are able to use those limited resources at the right place and time. And just like we found in that one audit with John Lynch at, I think, Royal Palm, if we're going someplace and find out we don't need to be there, well, we disengage and go engage where we need to be. Continuous, and again, making sure we're working and keeping government informed, business, the stakeholders involved, our citizens informed about what we're doing, not only about what we're doing, but being open for suggestions about how we can do our job better. Final page, we're still updating our, if you look, that's not exactly what our website is now. We're continually working on our website. And Jeff Whaley, right here, my IT guru expert, is continually working on making our website look good, look better, our whole IT systems, the way we do business better. That concludes my brief, and I just want to end by again thanking you for your time and your insights. I really do take them seriously, not only now but any time that you have an insight on how we can do our business better. That's what we're here, to serve the citizens of Palm Beach County, and we that continuous improvement, that's us too. We look for ourselves, and so I appreciate your input every time here and also individually, and so thanks for your sacrifice.
Thank you. At this point, we're open for discussion by any members of the committee. Any comments you'd care to make? Any additional questions? Ms. Pearman?
I want to thank you for introducing all of your people here so wonderfully and giving an insight onto what they do for the IG. And thank you for all that you do for our citizens of this county. Thank you.
Any other members care to make a comment? Ms. Schulman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General, I have to commend you and your office. This is incredibly impressive what you accomplish on a 6-month basis with 22 employees. You should be at 40, and I could imagine a staff of 100 taking 3 years to do what you do in 6 months with all of the audits and investigations and oversight and the work that the public does not see. So thank you for the work. I think the taxpayers can sleep much better at night now than they could 4 years ago, knowing that your office is overseeing our government, and if there is an issue, it's going to be brought to your attention, and you have the means and the tools to make recommendations that will hopefully be implemented, if not immediately, then in the near future. And I wanted to point out in your correspondence section that your previous 6 months of the top county departments that received the most correspondences were not in even the top 6 correspondences for this 6 months, which to me signifies positive change, that the lack of correspondence or complaints is a good thing, that you're providing that oversight and that hopefully those in government are paying attention, they know you're watching, and they're cleaning themselves up even if they were not individually the focus of an investigation or an audit. So I think just the idea of you being there seems to be having a domino effect on all employees in government. And the trend, I would hope, continues almost downwards, that over time you see fewer complaints and correspondences, and in my mind, that's a measure of success. So again, just congratulations and thank you for the work you do and your entire office. It's very impressive.
Thank you. And again, to both comments, thank you so much, but again, a great team of folks who they do the work. I stand up and talk. They're good folks.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mike?
I think not only do we have probably the best Inspector General that, for Palm Beach County, but I think we've got the best, the most impressive staff for this Inspector General's office. And I also voice my comments and voice my commendations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Then I'll make a couple of comments. Having been in this position long enough to deal with both Inspectors General, certainly Inspector General Steckler set a certain tone and accomplished a tremendous task by standing up the office to begin with. I think that in the past nearly 2 years, you've created an imprint on the office, and you've had a tremendous influence on your team and your staff, and at this point, I think they're very much your reflections of one another. The tone at the top that you set, whether it's with team building, with education, with outreach, with communication, has had a tremendous impact, and I think that is clearly reflected in the reduced correspondence, because education changes how people communicate and what they think should be communicated and those avenues that are used. But I think it's that tone at the top, General Carey, that will ultimately carry the day. We don't need hyperbole or hysteria. We need measured thought process, measured activities, measured processes, and measured results. Efficiency is one thing, effectiveness is another. And I think that you've demonstrated in the past nearly 2 years a very high level of effectiveness by building people, because that's part of your task too. And I think you succeeded with that tremendously, so thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any comment from the public? If there's any public here, I don't know that I see the public. Is there any new business to come before the committee? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.